on the local flood analysis plans that you did in the different hamlets. We use those depth grids to improve the FEMA flood map and to do our analysis. So, and that is one reason why this plan is different. And it's very good to have this updated information. Again, you want the most accurate information to make your best decisions, right? And when you go for grant applications, you use this information, which helps you determine the damages, really, to justify if your project is cost effective. So, so this is the plan. You know, during the planning process, it was run by the Safari Committee, which is a committee comprised of not only town officials, but Ulster County Department of the Environment. We have Catskill Watershed Corporation. Can you think of who else there? We've got DEP, yeah, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and Soil and Water Conservation District here, right?
If DPW also kind
DPW.
great thing.
So this has been a very good, active committee. We have very, very good attendance at every meeting, and people are providing information, reviewing information, and updating information. So it's very active. And again, all these meetings, they're on the second Tuesday of every month at 10 o'clock at the
Shandaken Watershed Office.
in
Shandaken.
in Chopin. And so it's been good. Now this process is going on for 9 months. We've had one meeting per month, you know, and now we're wrapping up the draft plan, and it's posted on the website. So anyway, so the planning process, we have a committee reviewing information. We reviewed any new plans that have been developed since the original plan. So any watershed plans, the new hazard mitigation plan for Ulster County was reviewed, the local flood analysis were reviewed, and all that information was extracted and put into this plan. We did a town profile, we did an update of the population, the demographics, the economics of the town, because all of that's very important when you're looking at how is flood affecting your town. And we looked at relevant programs and regulations, you know, any regulations, New York State regulations, federal regulations, and so forth. That's all summarized in this plan. And then we did a risk assessment, which was the basis for the mitigation strategy. The end of the plan has something which is very important. That's the maintenance procedure, and that's which describes how the town is going to review and update this plan every year and report the progress. So this town is very proactive since the Safari Committee meets every month. They have a pretty aggressive maintenance plan, and it's multiple times a year, which actually gets more points for CRS. So, okay, so the planning process steps, you know, it's a 4-step process where we, you know, again, look at all the plans, look at the data, assess the risk, understand what's vulnerable, what's being impacted by flooding, develop an action plan, and then monitor the progress. We did engage a wide range of stakeholders. We were hoping that we have more public participation, but we did have a lot of participation from agencies. So not only were the agencies on the committee involved, but we've sent this plan out to numerous agencies across the state, you know, the Cornell Climate Institute, Smart Communities, Realtor Associations, and so forth. So we're looking for input, New York State Department of Homeland Security, so we're looking for input from all of these agencies. Why? Because if any of these people have information that we haven't documented that might improve, you know, the flood conditions or make them worse, you know, it's very important for them to know. We've also sent the plan out to all of the neighboring jurisdictions here, so Margaretville, Olive, all the towns around here, Hardenburg, and so forth, and waiting for some input from them, because it's important for them to know, oh, if Shandaken is doing a project, will it affect them, and vice versa. So it's something that we'd like people to use as a resource. So when I say assess risk, what does that mean? Well, you know, the first thing to do is we're identifying where are the flood hazards. We've mapped where the flood hazard is. We profiled it. We have a summary of all the historic flooding events in Shandaken, which we've updated to the present day. We've inventoried the assets. We have a listing of, you know, the structures, the geolocations of the structures, the number of critical facilities, the location of critical facilities, so we understand for a certain flood what will be affected. We've estimated the losses, and then we evaluate the mitigation actions. Okay, so this is just a broad view of what's impacted by flooding. Again, you might want to look at your handout here. So since we don't have hamlet boundaries, we just went by zip code to try to understand where is the highest density of flood damages, and you can see here very easily that for the 1% flood, which is the 100-year flood or the regulatory flood, Phoenicia there is the highest exposure at 140 people. 140 people exposed from our analysis in 2013, and now with the new mapping, it's 143. So there's a little slight change there. So you can see that with the new mapping that there have been slight increases in most cases of population exposed to the flood. The numbers in green there on the right-hand column show the areas which actually had a decrease in the number of people exposed to the, that's the 500-year floodplain. So, out of the, a little over 3,000 people in the town, you can see the changes in exposure there.
Why did Pine Hill all of a sudden have more people?
Pardon me?
It looks like Pine Hill had a larger.
Well, your map changed,
Oh,
right? So, the actual boundaries of the floodplain may have changed. Or I guess there could be a lot of reasons for that, but, or you could have built something.
It was an approximate zone before that basically just followed the stream channel and said you're in floodplain if you're in the stream. And then when the new map came out, they had it rate, it was all LiDAR, and it spread.
Right, so you can't see this. So we looked at exactly what structures are exposed to flooding, so you can take a look at this. You see they really, follow the valleys there, and everything in this light yellow is the regulatory floodplain, the 100-year flood. You can see, where the density is for property exposed to the flood. All this, again, is important to understand, help prioritize projects, where's the highest impact and who is at risk. Okay, so severe repetitive loss properties, what are those? So severe repetitive loss properties are properties that have 2 or more claims of $1,000 in a 10-year period. So those are statistics that reflect people that have flood insurance. And so I have a map here, up there, which shows, where the areas of concentrated repetitive loss properties. And here we see them, a lot in Phoenicia here, and you see them in the center of the different hamlets. Okay.
that's 2 or more, you said?
A repetitive loss property is 2 or more.
2 or more.
2 or more claims. Yeah, repetitive loss.
In 10 years.
So I guess that brings us to, does that really reflect the risk of properties? I guess I'm going to go ahead and talk about the repetitive loss area analysis for a minute. I'll jump ahead. So, do you think that reflects the vulnerability and the losses? Well, as Rob just said, not everybody has flood insurance, so these may not really reflect what's happening. And so one of the reasons that we're looking at the repetitive loss area analysis is to understand, are there other structures in the area that are vulnerable to flooding, but that we just don't know about because they don't have flood insurance, or we don't know about because they're not submitting claims. So that's sort of the whole sort of background for the repetitive loss area analysis.
Well, a lot of it too, I think, is that you can submit a claim, but it's the only way they pay is if there's, the water is going into your building and done damage. It doesn't pay for anything outside your building, your property. It's just building. It's not
Correct.
really property. So it's a lot of times you have a flood, you can't really claim anything. So you can't tell by that.
And actually, that's a really good point. So we did have a public survey that's been on the website for those past 9 months, where we've asked people what their experience are with flooding, and we do have that information and have sort of included that in our analysis, but certainly that would help us understand, where there's some undocumented flooding.
It doesn't cover all the tables and chairs in front of Fritos, but
No, none of that.
Paid claims, yeah, but just, not just that claims in 10 years, but yeah, paid claims.
Right.
Okay, so, going on again, how did we identify projects? How did we identify projects? So after we collected all this information, the committee got together and we had a discussion, okay, what does the town do well? And what does it not do well? And what kind of projects would help the town become less vulnerable? And we came up with a catalog of mitigation alternatives, which is in the plan. So that catalog goes through a lot of strategies to help either fund projects or identify projects that ultimately became part of the mitigation strategy. So as we went through the discussion, we talked about, do we need better information on predicting floods, for instance, right? Do we need better public outreach? Do we need better education? Do we need another study? So all those things were discussed, and they became part of this catalog of mitigation alternatives. And then that became the background for the proposed mitigation strategy. So when you look in the plan, you'll see that for each project or each strategy, there's a description, there's an estimated cost, there's who's the lead agency to do that, and what are potential funding sources. So all of that just helps this plan become implementable, because there's a very specific plan to go ahead as to who needs to do what to implement these projects. Okay, so what progress has been made in the past 5 years? So if you look at the 2018 progress report, out of the 86, there were 86 initiatives, 86 projects. So 42% of them have been started, and there's been progress toward completion. 46% were complete, and 12% there's been no action taken.
And what area is this? Where is this?
So this is the list of mitigation projects that are that's in the
In
2013 report,
Oh.
the old report.
And it doesn't necessarily mean physical, it could be planning, exercise, or education.
Oh.
Okay, so what's changed? So this new plan, when we went through all these actions, we realized, a lot of the actions were very general, which were very good for the first plan. But since a lot of those general actions have already become part of the ongoing capabilities of the town, those actions were sort of taken out and described as ongoing capabilities. So it went from 86 actions in 2013 to 54 actions for this plan. So that just reflects that the town has been doing a lot, but also that there's been a lot completed. Okay, so as I mentioned, the base flood data has changed, so the new plan reflects that the new flood mapping. For NFIP update, we had new information from FEMA. It actually, due to the flux of, I guess, either properties having damage and perhaps properties that have been mitigated and or acquired and demolished, it looks like the NFIP repetitive loss properties, were 22 in 2013 and now 24 now. So there's a lot of reasons for that. There hasn't been a lot of movement in those figures, but it's a good sign that it's not going up significantly. And so just in terms of the vulnerability assessment, I said we did a lot of analysis on, what would be damaged by a flood. Using the old maps, we had estimated almost $23 million in damages for a 1% flood, and now with the new maps, it's almost $38 million damages. So there's more exposure reflected as a result of our analysis.
that's possible damage?
Right, so that's where you look at the potential flood,
Mhm.
right? And you look at these structures that would be in that area and.
That's a 100-year flood.
100-year flood.
That's if it was just catastrophic. That's if it was,
I think that's.
It's a 1% chance per year, you know, you have a 1% chance per year of
Assess
having a flood.
value of everything in, I believe that's what that is, it would be the assessed value of all structures, the exposure.
the exposure, you're exposed.
It's not, doesn't reflect the cost to rebuild, that's for sure, it's just that, the assessed value, I believe.
Yeah, it just gives you an idea of the magnitude.
And it has not been a 1% flood.
No.
No. So the 1% flood is worse than anything we've seen.
Correct.
I'm letting Rob answer that, because, yeah.
Yeah, so Irene for Shandaken, up in Big Indian Oliveria, and maybe down to about Alvin here, was right at the cusp of 100, we're gonna say maybe a little bit higher than a 100-year flood, just because of that backwater that took place in that hollow, and it blew out part of Oliveria Road, and that wall of water coming down through. Again, that wasn't a standard flood, that was a blowout of backwater. It was almost like a dam letting loose on a pond. But that, as it went down through the valley, it kind of dissipated, and Phoenicia, that was more like 75-year flood as opposed to the 100-year flood. Chichester, Stony Clove was running at about a 50-year flood elevation. Woodland Valley was at a 50-year flood elevation. So they base their FEMA stuff
The
on.
only thing that throws me off is that we're talking about, okay, that's infrastructure, but the flood insurance doesn't pay for any of that anyway. Flood insurance only pays residential or people that own buildings. They don't pay, they don't.
Well, right, so I mean, the purpose
I
of
mean,
this
if
plan.
they're putting that number in there, but that number doesn't reflect the buildings, it could reflect damage to the whole town of Shandaken.
Right, I mean, so this is
So, I mean,
a resource to help the town plan, right? for
You're
disaster.
talking about the 38 million? That number?
yeah,
No, that's structure.
that's just structure.
Yeah, that's not bridges,
Okay.
roads.
Get one bridge could cost 38 million.
One bridge is gonna maybe cost.
But the thing is
1.2
that, you know, I don't know, just throw, you know.
So you're wondering the
When we have
value?
a flood.
The value?
You know, yeah, no, the value I agree with, but you know, that's in harm's way, but it's not, like when we had a flood, if you looked at the damage that the flood insurance paid, I don't know what they got, probably maybe a couple $1 million on Irene, and that's a 100-year flood.
They paid about, I want to say, I think it was about 4 million.
Okay, 4 million. So that's,
Well,
you know, you're throwing a number out there, what, 38 million?
well, there wasn't a 100-year flood throughout the whole town, though, right?
Yeah,
Rob?
that
Right,
was-
I mean, that was just, it
it
just
could
was
go
here.
higher.
This is if, you know, it's a 100-year flood, you know, on all of the
There's
mountains.
also building
Oh,
cover
if
and
that's the
contents
case,
coverage
we
too.
wouldn't,
Right.
we're not gonna be.
You're not required to have contents coverage, right?
Right.
So,
A much less.
That's over our roofs.
And that probably, that 38 million is probably just insured value of the policies too, not the actual value. of the
Well, the
buildings.
38 million is the damage value
Policies.
of the value.
The value of policies or estimate?
The value of the damage of the building, not the policies. I understand what you're saying. I do think this is a valuable tool
Yeah,
to
no, I'm
look
not
at that.
saying, it just kind of makes it like, if we had a flood, we'd have $38 million worth of damage. We probably have more than that counting infrastructure, but from what the flood insurance, what they're gonna pay, they're not gonna pay 38 million.
No.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's 4, and that's the worst flood we ever had. So maybe, you know, I'm not saying it couldn't get worse, but,
That's worst case
you
scenario.
know,
The restructure.
those numbers, that's how they, you know. Anyway, all right.
Okay, all right. So the type of actions in the plan, we're talking about, you know, what are these actions? We mentioned that they aren't all projects. So there's 6 categories of projects that are reflected in this plan. from prevention, which are, regulatory measures, to property protection, which is acquisition, buyouts, or structural retrofits, public education awareness, that would be, providing education, providing outreach, providing access to flood information in the maps, natural resources protection, so that's, stream management and erosion protection, emergency services, which, includes emergency response, emergency hazard warning, and protection of critical facilities. And then structural projects, which are like dams, berms, retaining walls, and such. So this plan does reflect projects in all these different categories, which was one of the goals of the plan, to make sure that you are using all the different types of mitigation. Okay, so success stories. So these are just a few things that have been accomplished over the past 5 years for the plan. So I thought it'd be interesting to put them up there. So, there's been a suite of local flood analysis projects, which has provided basis for the conceptual design of new projects and even the implementation of projects, right? So that's all very important. That was definitely a strategy that was in the original plan, and that you made progress toward that. The town hall relocation, I guess that was identified during your pricing, and that's still in process. Is one of the projects that's in process. Property acquisition. So there have been a bunch of property acquisitions. I think at least 16 through the FEMA buyout process. Others in process. That definitely reduces your flood vulnerability. Bridge replacements. You replace 2 bridges and add another one. 3 bridges.
5.
5 bridges. Okay.
State did 3, town did 5, county did 20, but pick one out.
So that's helped, improve your infrastructure here and the transportation continuity. And then community rating system, we talked about that. So we're preparing to join the community rating system and have been implementing, measures that are going to make you successful in that. Okay, these are the types of things I talked about, out of the, 86 initiatives, 46 remain in the plan. A lot of them were completed and became ongoing capabilities. So things like that have now become part of the normal activities of the town, maintaining good standing in the National Flood Insurance Program, making sure that you're developing in accordance with your floodplain regulations and maps. That's been happening. Your emergency notification in place. You have a close collaboration with agencies here to help improve the potential for implementation of your projects. So Watershed Stream Management Program, they seem to be funding a lot and very supportive. All your New York State agencies. What jumped out at me, which I think is great, is that NISAG now is going to be invited to your Emergency Operations Center when you have a disaster to help coordinate. I mean, all these things are really important. And honestly, I think that by having these plans, you have a flood warning and response plan. I think that, by going through the process and understanding where the problems were, helps you identify these things and implement them. So I think that's a very, very good. You have your local flood analysis process, which is now an ongoing capability. And you've developed a prioritized list of bridge and culvert replacements. So all of that's very important. And we talked about the adoption of higher regulatory standards, which is going to just help any, new development more less flood prone. Okay, so what are some of the new actions in the plan? This is just a list of a few actions that we have here. One is, investing and funding flood prediction and forecast modeling to help improve your warning system. Create an inventory list for culvert replacements, taking into account future conditions. So when the committee looked at the goals and objectives, they improved them by including resiliency and climate change into the operations of this community. Because as we know, these maps are very good, but they really only reflect a point in time, and they aren't really reflecting future conditions. So certainly if you want to continue to be resilient, you want to make sure that you're taking that into account with your new infrastructure designs. It's installing permanent generators at the town buildings, relocating critical facilities out of the floodplain, replacement of the Bridge Street Bridge and the floodplain enhancement, which will create multiple benefits, and doing other hydraulic assessments, for instance, at Fox Hollow Bridge. So, and the town continues to support relocation. So these are just a handful of items that are in the flood mitigation plan. Okay, public outreach and feedback. So I mentioned that, it has been a public process, and Joyce has been nice enough to post all of our minutes on the website and so forth. We had over 100 responses to our floodplain, our public survey. We reviewed those with the committee, and those helped us build our new mitigation initiative. So out of the 135 responses as of last December 10th, the majority of people actually were not located in the floodplain, so that's kind of interesting. It would have been great if more people that live in the floodplain had answered the survey, but in any case, we got a lot of good information from the respondents. So climate change, hurricanes, nor'easters, and stream bank erosion are the highest concerns of the people that responded to the survey. And the majority believe the town is working toward reducing flood vulnerability and working toward flood prevention. And the majority of respondents would like to invest in property elevations. And next